You know, right now, in this very moment, you have the power to change everything. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when circumstances become perfect. Right now. And the beautiful truth is that the greatest changes you'll ever make don't require you to add anything to your life. They require you to let go. They require you to quietly, without fanfare or announcement, remove the things that have been holding you back all along. There's something powerful about silence when it comes to transformation. When you tell everyone about the changes you're making, something happens. The energy that should be going into the actual work of transformation gets dispersed into talking about transformation. And more than that, you open yourself up to the opinions, doubts, and projections of others. Not because people are bad or don't care about you, but because they can only see you through the lens of who you've been, not who you're becoming. So today, I want to talk to you about 10 things that must go from your life. 10 things that you need to eliminate quietly, without telling a soul, because this work is sacred. This work is yours alone. And when you do this work in silence, when you make these changes without announcement, something miraculous happens. Your life begins to shift in ways that words could never capture. The first thing you must eliminate from your life is the need for approval from others. This is perhaps the most challenging thing to let go of, because we've been conditioned since childhood to seek approval. We learn to look outside ourselves for validation, for confirmation that we're okay, that we're good enough, that we're doing the right thing. But here's what I've learned, and what I know to be true in the core of my being. When you need approval from others, you give away your power. You make them the authority on your life, and you become a prisoner to their opinions. Think about how much energy you spend trying to please people. Think about the decisions you've made or didn't make because you were worried about what someone else would think. Think about the dreams you've put on hold because someone might judge you or criticize you or tell you it's not practical. Every moment you spend seeking approval is a moment stolen from your authentic life. And the truth is, you'll never get universal approval anyway. It's impossible. Even if you twist yourself into a pretzel trying to please everyone, there will always be someone who disapproves. There will always be someone who thinks you should be different, do different, want different. So why are you giving away your precious life force trying to achieve the impossible? When you eliminate the need for approval, something wonderful happens. You start to hear your own voice again. You start to know what you really want, what you really think, what really matters to you. And you begin to live from that place of inner knowing rather than outer validation. You don't need to announce this to anyone. You don't need to tell your family or friends that you're no longer seeking their approval. You just quietly begin making decisions based on what feels right to you, what aligns with your values, what calls to your heart. The second thing that must go is your attachment to being right. This one is subtle because we don't usually think of ourselves as attached to being right. We think we're just defending the truth, or standing up for what's correct, or making sure people aren't misinformed. But underneath all of that is an ego need to be right, to be seen as intelligent, to be perceived as knowledgeable. And what does this attachment to being right cost you? It costs you relationships. It costs you peace. It costs you the ability to learn and grow. Because when you're attached to being right, you can't truly listen to another person. You can't be open to new information. You can't allow yourself to change your mind when presented with better evidence or different perspectives. I'm not saying you should abandon your values or your principles. I'm saying that in most of the daily interactions in your life, being right is far less important than being kind, being connected, being at peace. Most arguments aren't about important moral issues. They're about trivial things, ego things, things that won't matter next week or next month, or certainly not at the end of your life. What if you just let people be wrong sometimes? What if you didn't need to correct everyone? What if you could hear someone say something you disagree with and simply think, that's their perspective, without needing to change it? The freedom in this is immense. You'll find that you have so much more energy, so much more peace, so much more capacity for joy when you're not constantly in a state of needing to prove yourself right. And here's something else that happens when you let go of needing to be right. You become more right. I know that sounds paradoxical, but it's true. When you're not attached to being right, you can actually see things more clearly. You can take in information without your ego filtering it through its defensive needs. You can learn, you can grow, you can evolve. And you do all of this quietly, without announcing to anyone that you're now a person who doesn't need to be right. You just stop arguing about trivial things. You just start saying things like, you might be right about that, or that's an interesting way to look at it, or simply, I hear you. The third thing you must eliminate is blame. This is a big one because blame feels so justified. When something goes wrong, when we're hurt, when we're disappointed, it feels natural to look for who or what is responsible. It feels like we're just being honest, just calling things like they are. But blame is poison. It's poison to your peace of mind, poison to your relationships, and poison to your power. When you blame others for your circumstances, you give away your power to change those circumstances. You make yourself a victim of external forces. You say, in effect, my life is the way it is because of what they did, what they didn't do, how they treated me, the opportunities they didn't give me, the support they didn't provide. And all of that might be factually true. People might have treated you badly. You might have been dealt an unfair hand. You might have legitimate grievances. But here's the question that matters. Do you want to be right or do you want to be free? Do you want to hold on to your justified blame or do you want to reclaim your power to create a different life? Because you can't do both. You can't simultaneously blame others for your life and take responsibility for changing it. Eliminating blame doesn't mean excusing bad behavior or pretending that nothing wrong was ever done to you. It means choosing to focus your energy on what you can control rather than on what others should have done differently. It means accepting that, yes, these things happened, and now what am I going to do about it? It means understanding that regardless of how you got to where you are, you're the only one who can move yourself forward from here. And you eliminate blame quietly. You don't need to tell the people you've been blaming that you're no longer blaming them. You don't need to have a conversation about how you're now taking full responsibility for your life. You just stop blaming. When you catch yourself in blame, you gently redirect your thoughts. You ask yourself, what can I do about this situation? How can I respond differently? What's within my control here? The fourth thing that must go from your life is complaining. Complaining is so seductive because it feels like we're doing something. It feels like we're addressing a problem, like we're making our dissatisfaction known, like we're bonding with others over shared frustrations. But complaining without action is just rehearsing misery. It's strengthening your neural pathways of dissatisfaction. It's training your mind to see what's wrong rather than what's possible. Every time you complain, you're reinforcing your identification with the problem. You're saying to yourself and to the universe, this is who I am, someone who has these problems, who experiences these frustrations, who is subject to these difficult circumstances. And the more you complain, the more you'll find things to complain about because your mind gets trained to look for them. Now, I'm not talking about addressing legitimate problems or having honest conversations about difficulties. I'm talking about habitual complaining, chronic complaining, complaining as a way of being. I'm talking about the constant running commentary of what's wrong, what's annoying, what's not as it should be. What would happen if you just stopped? What would happen if, for 1 week, you decided not to complain about anything? Not to your spouse about the weather, not to your coworkers about the traffic, not to your friends about your aches and pains, not to anyone about anything. What if you just experienced whatever was happening without the layer of complaint on top of it? You'd find that most of the things you complain about aren't actually that important. You'd find that traffic is just traffic. Weather is just weather. Minor inconveniences are just minor inconveniences. You'd find that you have a lot more energy when you're not expending it on complaint. And you'd find that your mood improves dramatically because complaining creates negative mood, not the other way around. Again, you do this quietly. You don't announce that you're no longer complaining. You don't tell people, I don't complain anymore, because that would just be another form of seeking approval or trying to be seen a certain way. You just stop complaining. When someone tries to engage you in complaining, you might say something like, yeah, I hear you, or you might gently redirect the conversation, or you might just listen without adding your own complaints to theirs. The fifth thing you must eliminate from your life is the excuses you've been making. We all have them. We all have our stories about why we can't do what we want to do, why we haven't achieved what we want to achieve, why our life looks the way it does instead of the way we wish it looked. And some of these stories might be based on real constraints, but most of them, if we're really honest with ourselves, are just excuses. I'm too old. I'm too young. I don't have enough money. I don't have the right education. I don't have the connections. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I have responsibilities. I have obligations. I have people depending on me. I have health issues. I have limitations. The list goes on. And look, I'm not saying that real obstacles don't exist. I'm not saying that everyone has the same opportunities or that systemic barriers aren't real. But I am saying that most of us use our obstacles as excuses far more than we need to. Most of us are using our real constraints as reasons to not even try, to not even take the smallest step in the direction of our dreams. What if you eliminated just one excuse? What if you took the excuse you lean on the most and you just decided it no longer gets to run your life? What if you said, okay, yes, that's true, and I'm going to move forward anyway? What if you stopped explaining to yourself and others why you can't, and you started asking yourself how you can? Because here's what I know, people with far more significant obstacles than yours have done what you dream of doing. People with less money, less education, less support, less opportunity, more responsibilities, more challenges, more problems have still found a way. Not because they're superhuman, not because they're lucky, but because they refuse to let their circumstances be their excuse. When you eliminate excuses, you don't replace them with harsh self-judgment. You don't beat yourself up for having made excuses. You simply notice them, acknowledge them, and then gently set them aside. You say, that's a story I've been telling myself and I'm choosing a different story now. And you do this quietly, privately, in the sanctuary of your own mind and heart. The sixth thing that must go is your resistance to change. This seems obvious, doesn't it? Of course we want to change. That's why we're reading things like this, why we're interested in growth and transformation. But underneath our conscious desire for change, there's often an unconscious resistance to it, because change means stepping into the unknown. Change means leaving behind what's familiar, even if what's familiar isn't serving us. Your ego loves familiarity. Your ego feels safe with what's known, even if what's known is painful or limiting. So even as part of you wants your life to be different, another part of you keeps pulling you back to what's familiar. You sabotage yourself. You start moving forward and then find a way to slide back. You make progress and then create a crisis that derails you. And this resistance is often completely unconscious. You're not aware that you're resisting. You think you're trying, you think you're doing your best, but somehow things just keep not working out. This is your unconscious resistance to change at work. The way to eliminate this resistance is to first become aware of it, to notice the ways you talk yourself out of taking action, to notice the ways you create circumstances that keep you stuck, to notice the familiar patterns that repeat in your life. And then, instead of judging yourself for this resistance, to simply bring it into the light of awareness with compassion. You might say to yourself, I notice that I'm afraid of change. I notice that part of me wants to stay where I am because it's familiar. I notice that I'm scared of who I might become if I actually changed. And that's okay. It's human. But I'm choosing to change anyway. I'm choosing to move forward even with this fear. You eliminate the resistance by acknowledging it and then acting despite it. You don't wait for the resistance to go away because it might never fully go away. You just stop letting it run your life. You stop letting it make your decisions. And you do this quietly, in small ways, every day. You take one small action toward change, then another, and slowly the resistance loses its grip. The seventh thing you must eliminate is your tendency to make things harder than they need to be. So many of us have this habit. We complicate everything. We overthink. We create elaborate plans and strategies. We wait for the perfect moment, the perfect circumstances, the perfect state of readiness, and while we're doing all of this, we're not actually doing the thing. There's a simplicity to growth and change that we often miss because we're so busy making it complicated. What do you want? What's one small step you could take toward that? Then take it. That's it. That's the formula. But instead, we make it into this huge thing. We need to figure out the entire path before we take the first step. We need to know exactly how it's all going to work out. We need guarantees, but life doesn't work that way. The path reveals itself as you walk it. The how becomes clear as you take action. The resources you need appear when you need them. But none of this can happen if you're stuck in complication, in overthinking, in waiting for some imaginary perfect moment. What if you just made it simple? What if you identified one thing you want to change and you did one small thing today toward that change? Not a perfect thing, not a big thing, just one thing. And then tomorrow, another one thing. That's all growth really is. It's a series of small, simple actions taken consistently over time. You eliminate the tendency to make things harder by catching yourself in the act of complication and consciously choosing simplicity. When you notice yourself overthinking, you stop and ask, what's the simplest action I could take right now? When you notice yourself creating elaborate plans, you ask, what's the one thing I can do today? When you notice yourself waiting for the perfect moment, You remind yourself that this moment is the only moment you have. The eighth thing that must go from your life is the habit of comparing yourself to others. This is so destructive and yet so automatic for most of us. We look at what others have, what they've achieved, what they look like, what their lives seem like, and we measure ourselves against that. And we always come up short because we're comparing our insides to their outsides. We're comparing our messy reality to their curated image. But even beyond that, comparison itself is a flawed premise. You are not in competition with anyone else. Your journey is yours alone. Your path is unique. Your timing is your own. What someone else has or hasn't achieved has absolutely nothing to do with you and your potential. When you compare yourself to others, you're either making yourself feel inferior or superior, and both of those are problems. Both of those take you out of your own experience and put you in this false hierarchy of better than and less than. Both of those disconnect you from your authentic self and your authentic path. What if you just stopped looking sideways? What if you kept your eyes on your own path, your own growth, your own journey? What if you celebrated others' successes without making them mean something about you? What if you acknowledged others' struggles without feeling better about yourself by comparison? This isn't easy because comparison is so habitual, especially in a world of social media where everyone's highlight reel is constantly on display. But it's essential because you will never be at peace, you will never be satisfied, you will never feel like enough as long as you're measuring yourself against others. You eliminate comparison by catching yourself in the act and redirecting your attention. When you notice yourself comparing, you acknowledge it without judgment, and then you bring your focus back to yourself. You ask, what do I want? What matters to me? What's my next step? You might even develop a simple phrase you say to yourself when you catch yourself comparing, something like, that's their path, this is mine, or their journey is not my journey. The ninth thing you must eliminate is your attachment to how things should be. This is the source of so much suffering. We have ideas about how our life should look, how other people should behave, how situations should unfold, how we should feel, and then reality is different from our shoulds, and we suffer. We resist what is because it doesn't match our idea of what should be. But here's the truth, reality is as it is. Your ideas about how it should be don't change it. Your resistance to what is doesn't change it. Your insistence that things should be different doesn't make them different. All it does is create suffering for you. This doesn't mean you become passive, or that you don't work to change things, or that you accept injustice or harm. It means you start from a place of accepting what is, and then from that place of acceptance, you choose how to respond. You stop wasting energy on should, on, if only, on why is this happening. You acknowledge what is actually happening, and then you decide what you want to do about it. When you eliminate your attachment to how things should be, you become so much more peaceful. You become so much more flexible. You become so much more effective because you're dealing with reality as it is, rather than fighting with reality, because it's not as you think it should be. You practice this by noticing your shoulds. Every time you think or say should, you're creating suffering for yourself. So you notice it, and then you replace should with is. This shouldn't be happening becomes this is happening. He should have called me becomes he didn't call me. They should appreciate me more becomes they don't appreciate me the way I want. And from that place of is, you can then ask yourself, now what do I want to do? How do I want to respond? What's within my control here? The 10th and final thing you must eliminate from your life is the belief that you're not enough. This is the root of so much of the other things we've talked about. The need for approval comes from believing you're not enough as you are. The attachment to being right comes from needing to prove your worth. The blame and complaining come from feeling victimized by life because you don't believe you're powerful enough to create something different. The excuses come from believing you don't have what it takes. The comparison comes from believing others are more than you or better than you. This belief that you're not enough is the deepest lie you've ever been told, and the tragedy is that you've been telling it to yourself. You are enough. Right now, as you are enough. Not when you achieve something, not when you become something, not when you have something. Now, as you are enough. This doesn't mean you can't grow or change or improve. It means the growth and change and improvement come from a place of already being enough, not from a place of trying to become enough. When you try to become enough, you're operating from lack. You're operating from the belief that you're currently deficient. And that energy of lack creates more lack. But when you know you're enough, when you really know it in your bones, then growth comes from overflow. It comes from joy. It comes from curiosity and excitement rather than from desperate grasping and proving. You grow not because you have to in order to be okay, but because you want to, because it's fun, because you're expanding into your potential from a place of already being whole. Eliminating the belief that you're not enough is perhaps the most important work you'll ever do. And it's not a one-time thing. It's a practice, because this belief is so ingrained, so reinforced by the culture, so connected to your early conditioning that you'll need to choose to believe in your enoughness over and over again. You do this by catching the thoughts that say you're not enough, the thoughts that say you need to be more, do more, have more, achieve more in order to be okay, the thoughts that say you're lacking something essential, the thoughts that say others are better, more worthy, more deserving, and when you catch these thoughts, you don't fight with them. You simply acknowledge them, and then you choose a different thought. You say to yourself, I am enough. I have always been enough. I will always be enough. And you support this new belief with evidence. You notice the ways you are enough. You acknowledge your strengths, your gifts, your qualities. You remember times when you were resilient, capable, loving. You see yourself clearly, not through the lens of lack, but through the lens of wholeness. And slowly over time, this new belief becomes stronger than the old one. Now, here's what I want you to understand about all 10 of these things you're eliminating. You don't do this work to become someone different. You do this work to become more fully yourself. All of these things. The need for approval, the attachment to being right, the blame, the complaining, the excuses, the resistance to change, the tendency to make things harder, the comparison, the attachment to shoulds, the belief that you're not enough. These are all layers covering your true self. They're not you. They're just patterns you've learned, habits you've developed, beliefs you've picked up along the way. Your true self doesn't need approval because it knows its own worth. Your true self doesn't need to be right because it's secure in its knowing. Your true self doesn't blame because it's too busy creating. Your true self doesn't complain because it's focused on what's possible. Your true self doesn't make excuses because it's committed to its vision. Your true self doesn't resist change because it understands that change is life itself. Your true self doesn't complicate things because it operates from wisdom and simplicity. Your true self doesn't compare because it knows it's incomparable. Your true self doesn't insist on shoulds because it flows with what is. Your true self knows it's enough because it is. It always has been. So this work of elimination isn't about self-improvement in the traditional sense. It's about self-revelation. It's about removing what's false so that what's true can shine through. It's about releasing what's not yours so that you can claim what is yours. It's about letting go of who you're not so that you can be who you are. And you do this quietly. You do this in the secret chambers of your own heart. You don't announce it. You don't make declarations. You don't tell people about the new you. You just start being it. You start living from this place of truth. And over time, people will notice. They'll say something's different about you. They'll want to know what changed. And you can share if you feel called to, but you don't need to. Because the change itself is the point, not the recognition of the change. This quiet elimination, this private transformation, this is sacred work. This is the work of a lifetime. And the beautiful thing is that you can start right now. You don't need to wait for anything. You don't need to prepare. You don't need to have it all figured out. You can just choose right now in this moment one of these 10 things to begin releasing from your life. Maybe it's the need for approval. Maybe today you make one decision based purely on what you want, what feels right to you, without considering what anyone else will think. Maybe it's blame. Maybe today, when you catch yourself blaming someone or something for your circumstances, you redirect that energy into asking what you can do differently. Maybe it's the belief that you're not enough. Maybe today you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I am enough, and you mean it. One choice, one moment, one shift. That's all it takes to begin. And then tomorrow, another choice, another moment, another shift. And day by day, quietly, without fanfare, your life changes. Not because you added something to it, but because you removed what was in the way. You become lighter. You become freer. You become more yourself. And from that place of authenticity, from that place of freedom, from that place of knowing your own worth, you create a life that's aligned with your highest vision. You show up in your relationships with more love and less neediness. You pursue your dreams with more courage and less fear. You meet challenges with more resilience and less resistance. You experience joy more fully because you're not blocking it with complaint and comparison. You experience peace more deeply because you're not disturbing it with blame and attachment to how things should be. This is the life that's available to you. This This is the life that's waiting for you on the other side of these eliminations. And it's not some far-off future life. It's available right now. Because the moment you start letting go of these things, you start experiencing the benefits. The moment you stop seeking approval, you feel freer. The moment you stop blaming, you feel more powerful. The moment you stop complaining, you feel lighter. The moment you stop making excuses, you feel more capable. The moment you release comparison, you feel more content. The moment you accept what is, you feel more peaceful. The moment you embrace your enoughness, you feel more whole. These aren't things you have to earn or achieve. They're the natural result of removing what's in the way. They're what emerges when you clear the clutter from your consciousness. They're who you really are underneath all the layers of conditioning and habit and false belief. So, I'm inviting you right now to begin this work of quiet elimination. Choose one thing from this list, just one. And for the next week, pay attention to it. Notice when it shows up in your life. Notice the thoughts, the behaviors, the patterns connected to it. And when you notice it, gently, without judgment, choose differently. Choose to not seek approval in that moment. Choose to not need to be right in that conversation. Choose to not blame in that situation. Choose to not complain about that circumstance. Choose to not make that excuse. Choose to not resist that change. Choose to not complicate that decision. Choose to not compare yourself to that person. Choose to accept what is in that moment. Choose to remember that you're enough right now. And as you do this, as you practice this quiet elimination day by day, you'll start to notice something remarkable. You'll notice that your life is changing without you trying to change it. You'll notice that opportunities show up. You'll notice that relationships improve. You'll notice that you feel different, lighter, more at peace. You'll notice that things that used to bother you don't bother you anymore. You'll notice that you have more energy, more creativity, more joy. This is the power of elimination. This is the power of letting go. This is the power of removing what's false to reveal what's true. And you do it quietly, privately, sacredly, because this is between you and your highest self. This is between you and the truth of who you are. This is between you and the life you came here to live. You don't need permission to do this work. You don't need anyone's approval or agreement or support, though those things are nice if you have them. You just need your own willingness, your own commitment, your own choice, made again and again, to let go of what's not serving you and to step into what is. And as you do this work, you'll inspire others, not by telling them what you're doing, but by being the change. You'll inspire them by the peace they feel in your presence. You'll inspire them by the authenticity they sense in you. You'll inspire them by the freedom they see you living. And some of them will ask you about it. Some of them will want to know what you're doing differently. And when they ask, you can share. You can tell them about this work of quiet elimination. You can tell them that change is possible, that transformation is available, that freedom is real. But you don't need their questions to validate your transformation. You're not doing this for recognition. You're doing this for your own liberation. This is your life, your one precious life. And you get to decide how you live it. You get to decide what you keep and what you release. You get to decide who you're going to be. And the decision doesn't have to be big or dramatic or announced to the world. It can be quiet, private, sacred. It can be a whisper in your own heart. I'm ready to let go. I'm ready to be free. I'm ready to be me. And when you make that decision, when you really make it, everything changes. Not overnight, not magically, but surely, steadily, inevitably. Because you're no longer working against yourself. You're no longer holding yourself back. You're no longer blocking your own light. You're clearing the way. You're removing the obstacles. You're eliminating what's false so that what's true can flourish. So here's my final invitation to you. Start today. Start now. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect understanding or the perfect circumstances. Just start. Choose one thing to eliminate. Choose one pattern to release. Choose one belief to let go of. And then do it quietly, privately, sacredly. And watch what happens. Watch how your life begins to shift. Watch how you begin to feel different. Watch how the world begins to respond to you differently. This is the beginning of your true life. This is the beginning of your freedom. This is the beginning of you becoming fully, completely, authentically yourself. And it starts with elimination, with letting go, with releasing what's not yours so you can claim what is. It starts with these 10 things quietly removed from your life, creating space for the magnificent being you truly are to emerge and shine and live fully. This is your invitation. This is your moment. This is your life, waiting for you to step into it fully. And all it requires is your willingness to let go of what's in the way.